Right. Well, it's the top of the hour, so I'd like to welcome everyone to this online version of the Public Good App House. We are Caravan Studios, a division of TechSoup, who, as you likely know, is a nonprofit that supports other nonprofits, NGOs, and civil society, broadly speaking, with technology. Caravan, the apps division of TechSoup, started 6 years ago to accelerate the use of purpose-built technology by organizations all over the world. In that time, the team has found a whole range of great products and built a few, which you can see on our website at www.caravanstudios.org. We started hosting these events as a way of sharing the tools that we found out in the world. This particular event is focused on products that encourage and support civic engagement, including voting. In just a moment, I will turn the reins over to the moderator. But first, please note that during the presentations, you can ask questions in the chat. I will be helping sort through the questions and ask them of the moderator during the event. After the event, we will share a recording of this online demo session, as well as the questions and answers. We will also be sharing resources related to this call and all of the URL. So, without much further ado, I would like to go ahead and turn it over to today's moderator, Tiana Epps Johnson, the founder and executive director at the Center for Technology and Civic Life. So, over to you, Tiana.
Thank you, Chris. I'm going to take a moment to share my screen. And I want to confirm that you all are seeing my presentation.
We see it.
Excellent. So thanks so much for having me. Again, I am Tiana Epps Johnson, and I'm very excited to join you today as your moderator. Before handing it over to each of today's panelists, over the next 10 minutes or so, I'm going to share a little bit about myself, the work that I lead at Center for Technology and Civic Life, and some context about the current state of civic engagement and the role that technology can play. So a bit about myself. I am the founder and executive director of the Center for Technology and Civic Life, a nonprofit that I'll tell you a little bit more about shortly. I'm also a part of the inaugural class of Obama Foundation Civic Fellows. And I've spent the last decade working in partnership with government, civic engagement organizations, and technology companies to think about the ways that we can use technology to increase civic participation, with a focus on improving voting in elections here in the US. I got hooked on this work in 2010 when I was part of a team that developed the first free, open, and standardized data set of voting locations in the US and a corresponding embeddable lookup tool where anyone could put in their address and find out exactly where to go to vote. For me, that work was a proof of concept for the power of connecting people with critical civic information online. And since then, I haven't looked back. In 2014, I founded the Center for Technology and Civic Life with two amazing co-founders. CTCL is a nonpartisan nonprofit based in Chicago, but we work nationally. And at CTCL, we're connecting Americans with the information they need to become and remain civically engaged. And we're working to ensure that our elections are professional, inclusive, and secure. We have two core strategies to achieve our mission. Our government services team connects local election departments with tools and training so that they can best serve their communities. Our professional development trainings focus on helping election departments keep pace with advances in technology. To get a little bit more concrete about what that looks like, we train on things like how to use social media for voter engagement, or how to use data for resource allocation so that we don't see hours-long lines at polling places. And since the 2016 election, we've trained hundreds of election departments on cybersecurity best practices to protect our voting systems. If you're not an election administrator, which I would guess most of you aren't, you're much more likely to have come in contact with our civic data work, although you might not have known it. Our civic data team aggregates, standardizes, and publishes nationwide data sets of answers to 4 key questions. Who are my elected officials? How do I contact them? What candidates and referenda will be on my ballot in the next election? And where can I learn more? This data is available for free through the Google Civic Information API or directly from us. And it helps to power many of the most impactful tools driving civic participation, including some of the ones you'll hear about today. To date, our ballot and elected official data has been accessed over 250 million times. As you know, I'm joined today by representatives from 4 other organizations who are all working to help people take meaningful civic action in elections and beyond. Jill from Democracy Works, Alexander from Countable, Dale from WeVote, and Jean from Purple Patriot. Before turning the conversation over to each of the panelists, I'm going to share some context about the incredible opportunity we all have to help our friends, family members, colleagues, neighbors, and others in our community become civically engaged, particularly at a time when so many people are hungry to understand how they might take action to shape the decisions that their elected officials are making so that our politics and policy making might better reflect our values. So let's start with voting in the US. I'll get the bad news out of the way first. Currently in the US, we have pretty poor participation rates in elections. Nearly 40% of eligible adults don't participate in presidential elections. And even fewer folks participate in more localized elections. But the good news is, this participation gap presents a huge opportunity. There are nearly 100 million people who we have an opportunity to bring into the voting process. But civic engagement doesn't start and end with elections. There are meaningful ways we can shape decision-making by elected officials and positively impact our communities year-round. Here too, there is a ton of untapped potential. When we look at a variety of different vectors for civic participation, like contacting an elected official or attending a local government meeting, we see an even lower rate of participation, meaning that we have an even greater opportunity to activate others. But why should we care? Voting and other civic engagement is not just about feeling good about fulfilling a civic duty. It's not just about exercising our right or voicing an opinion, although it's all of those things. But civic engagement also has concrete benefits for our communities. Research shows that engaged communities are more prosperous, healthier, and safer. So why then aren't more people civically engaged? Research to understand why there's so much untapped civic potential reveals that, among other things, it can be a lot of work to figure out how to be civically active. We each have dozens of representatives, several layers of government, myriad rules for how and when to engage, not a lot of clarity about the specific things our elected officials or candidates on our ballot are responsible for, and information is scattered in so many places, it can not only be difficult to find the answers you're looking for, but it can be quite difficult to know what is trustworthy. But while we have a system that can make being an active citizen a lot of work, all of these representatives and meetings and levels of government also mean that there are so many different ways that we might exert influence. Tech tools, like the ones you'll have an opportunity to hear about today, are helping us all navigate this complexity. They're designed to give you timely, personalized information to support you in registering to vote, finding your polling place, or requesting a vote by mail ballot if that's a more convenient voting option for you. They help you learn about the candidates on your ballot so that you can make an informed decision at the polling place. They help you to stay up to date about legislation that you care about, with specific actions you can take to make sure your representatives know how you feel. And each of these tools are things that you can share with other people to catalyze their civic engagement. And the best part is that there is a huge return on investment for helping others. Civic engagement is a habit. For example, the best predictor of whether someone will vote is whether they voted before. So if you can take that first action or help someone else take their first action, chances are they'll do it again and again. So with that, I want to thank you. I'm sharing my contact information here for anyone who wants to learn more about the center. Please feel free to reach out. And now I'm going to hand it over to Jill from Democracy Works.
Thanks, Tiana. All right, confirming that you can see my slide.
Yes.
Fantastic. So hello, everyone. Thanks so much for attending the event today. And a big thanks to Caravan Studios for hosting. And of course, a big thanks to Tiana for moderating as well. As Tiana said, my name is Jill Brownfield, and I work at an organization called Democracy Works. We're a 501c3 nonpartisan nonprofit organization. And our mission is to improve civic participation by simplifying and modernizing the voting process. So we work with both voters and election administrators to do that work. And today I'm going to speak a little bit about our voting-facing initiatives. Voting should be easy, but for a lot of folks, there are a number of process barriers. Tiana reviewed some of those different barriers earlier, and there's some here. Our founder, Seth Flaxman, actually came up with the idea for TurboVote when he missed a few local elections back home while he was away for graduate school. And that's just one small example of the type of process barriers folks run into. The good news is that TurboVote exists and other great tech tools to help you vote. So TurboVote is our flagship product, and I'll be demoing that for you today. And it seeks to reduce those process barriers for folks so that we can get voters the information they need to cast a ballot in every election from the federal level all the way down to the local level. And since building TurboVote in 2010, we've helped over 6 million users with our election reminders and voter registration assistance tools. So how exactly does it work? Let's dive into the TurboVote demo. So we collect the user's information and guide them through the voter registration process through an easy step-by-step flow. Our tool is available in English and Spanish, and we have a live help desk stacked with bilingual people to help voters get the help that they need or if they have extra questions. So once we collect the user's name, we ask the user how they'd like to receive their election reminders. We have SMS and email reminders. You can subscribe to both, but it would be a little bit duplicative. And responding to any of those notifications actually directs you to our help desk, so you can have a text conversation with someone from the help desk even. Once we collect their name and contact information, we ask the user if they need to register to vote, and if so, where. And once an address is entered into TurboVote, we actually, in real time, map the user to their election precinct. And we do that because our research team collects all of the laws, regulations, and rules surrounding voting in each state, whether that's, the requirements for voter registration or the ID that you need to bring to the polls to vote. And so we want to make sure we deliver that information effectively in real time. And if the user's already registered to vote, we make sure they haven't moved since they last registered, and obviously help them get signed up for those election reminders. And then all users are actually encouraged to check their voter registration status through our notifications, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. TurboVote can help a user navigate their state's online voter registration process if their state has one. Or we can help the voter register with a paper form. And TurboVote will actually pre-fill this paper form with the user's information so that they just need to print it off, enter their ID number, and sign it, and mail it in, of course, to their election official. Once we help the user register to vote or update their voter registration, we also collect a little bit of information about a voter's preferences, like how they like to vote and what their party is, so we can make sure that our election notifications are tailored to what they prefer. And then, so once they get through that whole process, we provide next steps on that done page, and we also shoot off a welcome email. And that welcome email includes important next steps information, which is super critical if somebody needs to still mail in that paper registration form. And then the next that they'll hear from TurboVote is actually ahead of their election. So 30 days out from their next election, the user will receive either via email or via SMS a pretty comprehensive notification that includes a call to action to check your registration status, information about when the election is coming up, and early voting information, things like that, so that the user can make a plan to go and vote. And then the day before the election, the user will receive another reminder with their polling place information and any critical voter ID information. And that'll happen for every election that they have the opportunity to vote in, whether they're getting a new president or a new sheriff in their county. And I mentioned earlier at the beginning of the presentation that we've helped over 6 million people with the TurboVote platform. And we do that in large part through partnerships. We partner with colleges and universities, nonprofit organizations, and companies. And each of our partners have access to a unique customizable TurboVote page that they use to power their voter engagement campaigns. Here's an example of Snapchat's voter engagement campaign from last year. And along with that customizable site, the partners actually have access to a suite of analytics so they can track the effectiveness of their voter engagement campaigns. So if you're interested in learning more about partnering, please do reach out to me. My email's here in the final slide. And then, of course, everybody should sign up for TurboVote today at turbovote.org. So I'll pause there. I think we're moving into just a short question and answer period.
Thank you so much, Jill. A reminder to please chat any questions that you have in. I wanted to kick things off with a question about your audience. Is there a target user for TurboVote? What audience, is there an audience that your tool is particularly well suited for?
TurboVote itself, since it's a web app, it's a digital tool. And so I think digital tools obviously supply a certain service to folks who rely on digital tools for other things. But that can basically be everyone, right? I have like text message conversations with my grandmother now, and she like texts me in emoji. And so TurboVote is really well suited for a lot of folks. I would suited who are struggling to figure out how to register to vote or how to maybe vote by mail. I mentioned our college and university program, and we have a really robust program there because a lot of students need help voting by mail. You know, maybe mom is running for city council back home and they want to make sure that they vote by mail, or maybe they want to register in their town where they're going to school, but they don't know the address for their dormitory. And so we work with a lot of colleges and universities to bridge that gap. And I'd say, you know, we do have a lot of young folks. That's not the majority of our user base, but we do definitely support a lot of young folks as they tend to be more, I don't want to say more digitally savvy, but what we got.
Thank you. And one question about you. What inspires you to do this work?
Oh gosh. Well, I just mentioned my grandma who I text with, and my grandma had a over 50-year career with the U.S. government. And after she retired, she started volunteering as a poll worker and has been a poll worker in every election in her city since she retired. And she just is really inspiring to me, and growing up, I learned a lot from her. And I think that really pushed me towards, I guess, a career in civic engagement. And then volunteering with AmeriCorps and doing some campaign work right after college kind of woke me up to the reality that civic engagement isn't easy for everyone, and there's a lot of different barriers, whether that is active disenfranchisement or just process barriers. And so, you know, that really inspires me to do that work. But yeah.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Jill. We're now going to transition to our next speaker, Alexander from Countable.
Hello, thank you so much for having me. This is an incredible audience. By the way, civic tech and gov tech are a pretty small world, and so you get to see a lot of familiar faces every time we do events like this, so it's a lot of fun. So I'm here to talk a little bit about Countable. Countable, and I'm going to share some slides here. Countable, while I'm pulling this up, is a civic tech application that was designed for consumer use. And so our mission was to basically make the government a little bit more accessible and feel a little bit smaller for people all around the country. And so we started off building a civic tech application, as you can see here. A second. For some reason, it won't let me switch my slides. Well, my father always said visual aids are a crutch for the inarticulate, so I may become articulate really quickly. There we go. So Countable has kind of 3 prongs of what we do. One is we provide costly web applications or consumer applications. If you go into the iTunes Market today, you can download Countable. You can go to our website, countable.us, and get engaged with our consumer apps. You can and I'll talk about that in a moment. The second is that we build licensed products to help people and organizations, advocacy organizations and companies engage their audiences to take civic action and get more civically engaged. And then three, we generally want to make civic causes more accessible to every American, so we have atomized tools that can be embedded in other people's sites as opposed to destination sites that we build. And so to give you a little bit more in depth of what that looks like, here's the consumer platform. And so if you go and download Countable in the iOS store today, you can see this application here. It gives you a daily feed of summaries of legislations and key news events without any editorial, just the facts, telling you what's in a bill, what the cost ramifications are, who's supporting it, all that good stuff. It'll give you notifications on a daily basis of votes that are coming up for issues that your member of Congress is voting for, or the Senate. And as you can see here, you can take action and call, send a message, or send a video message to your elected member of Congress at any time. And so through this platform, we've facilitated roughly 20 or so million messages sent to Congress since we founded it. So very successful in that sense, and we have a significantly involved, very active user community who are reading and putting comments on public issues every single day in a very respectful and very constructive way, which we're very proud of. From this base platform, we built our enterprise business, which gave us the ability to do this type of advocacy work or facilitation of action for other organizations. And so here you can see the International Justice Mission. They ran a video campaign where they sent this page out to all their audience, and they were able to record video message and talk about why this digital march to end slavery was an important event for them. So facilitating advocacy, we then sent all these messages to members of Congress or lawmakers. We do this also for state and local representatives and also other key decision makers, sometimes provosts of universities or things like that. But our goal here is to get people involved in the process, get them sharing or creating UGC or user-generated content that can then act as a voice that lifts up their cause and makes other people pay attention. The video testimonial tool that I was mentioning before is also something that's been used for a number of presidential campaigns as well as local campaigns, because it's very difficult to hear in the voice of an end consumer, of someone who actually wants to take action and support a cause. And so this tool allows people to record video messages on their phone, on their computer, through the web browser, send those video messages out to an elected representative, or the organization can just collect them for rich user-generated content to be used in ad campaigns or creative or marketing materials to induce other donors and other action takers to get involved. And really, to kind of cap it off, what we now offer are full white label platforms that are all coming through the Countable platform, where we allow brands to come on. We give them a full labeled site with a backend CMS and analytics where they can post content and actions that their users get engaged with. The platform comes bundled with a marketing automation platform that's regularly engaging their audience over an extended period of time. The average Countable user that signs up takes somewhere between 20 and 30 actions. And so imagine that signing up for alerting or recording a video, signing a petition, contacting your representatives, answering a polling question. Those are 28 or 30 actions over the course of that useful life. And so imagine as an organization what you could do with your users being engaged for months at a time, taking that number of actions. And the core thesis kind of underpinning everything, and what I wanted to close with in terms of what Countable has discovered, is that we've realized that rich, evocative content paired with action drives meaningful relationships. Meaningful relationships keep people around for extended periods of time. And if you look at the way that advocacy organizations have traditionally operated, they're operating on a campaign-based or episodic engagement model, which is extremely expensive. And so let's say I want to have a campaign for a push or a particular piece of legislation I want to further. I have to go out and market to my audience on a regular basis, or go out to Facebook and pay for that audience, where organic reach is very low. And so it's expensive for me to reach them. And then once they take that action, there's no way for me to keep them engaged past that. And so I have to pay to engage them again in the future. So on a platform like Countable, where we can provide you a white labeled application like this in a box, we're able to keep people engaged for extended periods of time, taking multiple actions, which dramatically changes the unit economics of engagement. So that's kind of the platform as a whole. One other thing that I wanted to mention in terms of the mission of why we do this is, we were all, when we started Countable, upset with the way that the political system was set up in the US from a user experience perspective. It didn't feel very accessible. If you look at a piece of legislation, I don't know if anyone's read any healthcare bills anytime recently, but it's very, very difficult to learn. It's very difficult to understand. It's very difficult to participate. And so our goal was to make democracy a little bit easier to engage with, give you a direct line to your elected representative and updates of when you should get involved at times where it really matters. And so that's our mission. We do that for other folks as well. And so we partnered with TurboVote and a number of other organizations that are connected to the folks here in the webinar today, and very happy to take any questions that you have.
Thanks so much, Alexander. The first question that we have for you is a technical one. Does Countable use any natural language processing or other analytics to get a sense of the interest clusters or sentiment behind the video messages?
That's a really, really good question. AI and NLP and ML are a bunch of acronyms that freak people out, and they use it very incorrectly these days. And so it's good to really think about it very directly in terms of what it is. Natural language processing, we've experimented with a little bit in the past. We were very interested in running more complex sentiment analysis. But interestingly enough, NLP works a little bit better when messages are not as emotionally charged as sometimes political opinions can be. And so sometimes it's very difficult for NLP algorithms to accurately gauge sentiment when people are, let's just say, typing in all caps, which in today's political environment does happen more frequently than maybe you may imagine. And so we've done a little bit with it, but we're definitely continuing to experiment.
Thanks. The next question comes from someone who is also working on a digital tool. And they say that they've been building a site or app, a platform that gives voters information about how prosecutors and judges handle sexual violence cases at the local level. And to make their app sustainable, so this is a question about sustainability, they think that they might need to bundle it with other functionality or other modules. Beyond just sort of the core thing that they're trying to accomplish. Is this common, and can you share any advice or insights?
Yeah, wow, that's a really good question. That's a deep product question, which I love. I'm a big product guy. Yeah, I mean, so the key question you have to ask yourself is what inside of the application creates a daily pattern of behavior? How can I make myself relevant to this person on an ongoing basis? And one of the classic examples of this problem is LinkedIn. LinkedIn was what, at the beginning, people called the 6-month social network, meaning I would go into LinkedIn, I would, when I'm pissed off at my boss or I hate my job, and I'd update my resume, I'd look at other people's profiles, but then my boss would say something fine and I wouldn't care anymore, and then I wouldn't go into LinkedIn for another 6 months. That was a really huge problem. And one way that they got around that was effectively social proofing. And so one of their most effective features was that people who viewed my profile button, and I can click on that and see it, that drove an enormous amount of return traffic back to the application. But it took a lot to get there. And then they eventually evolved it into a daily platform where there's a lot of content coming through it. So they built that behavioral pattern. And so I think it's a really good question. I would strongly consider, can you create a daily pattern of behavior that's value added to the person, makes them feel good, makes them feel like they're contributing, getting something out of it. If you don't think you can create that content on a regular basis, I'd strongly recommend supplementing with other materials. I see a lot of single-use advocacy applications fail because their scope of focus is too narrow and they can't keep people engaged for long enough, despite the fact that that person may really care about that issue. So good question. Bundling could be the right way to go.
Great. Thank you, Alexander. It looks like those are all the questions that we have. So we're going to go to our next presenter, Dale from WeVote.
Thank you, Tiana. All right. Well, this is a typical ballot book, and it would take 15 hours to read it cover to cover. And then there are the political mailers, and the sheer volume of information makes figuring out how to vote daunting and confusing. But even with an internet full of information, regular voters still feel uninformed. And the number of people who feel uninformed jumps from 44% to 76% when you ask voters who rarely vote. The impact of which is that over 20% of voters do not complete their ballot, and others skip election day altogether. And representative democracy works best when more votes are cast. So WeVote is attacking this problem. My name is Dale McGrew, and I'm the co-founder and CTO of WeVote. WeVote is an award-winning app that you can download from either app store or use on our website. We do the Herculean task of combining ballot data from all 50 states, side by side with endorsements from local papers and organizations across the political spectrum, like the ACLU and the American Conservative Union. Here's how it works. So you confirm your zip code and select the issues and opinions that you trust. And these make up your personal filters. Using your personal filters, WeVote gives you a personal score for all candidates and measures on your ballot. So if you care about what the League of Women Voters thinks about an upcoming infrastructure bond, we've got you covered. And if you care what your friends think and want to see their views privately, we've got you covered. And we've been battle tested during the 2018 election and during the elections this year. In previous generations Americans determined how to vote around the dinner table or in coffee shops. And increasingly, voters are figuring out how to vote on their phone, in line at the polling place. With WeVote, you have everything you need to feel confident about voting your values in your pocket, anywhere, anytime. So having founded and sold 2 successful high-tech startups, the WeVote team brings together deep experience from Silicon Valley and wisdom from the political world. And we're a community project. WeVote's cutting-edge technology was built by over 100 wickedly talented open-source volunteers. So there's 164 days until the first of many presidential primaries. But even before those 2020 primaries, we're running many local elections, including the November 5th, 2019 general election and the North Carolina primary in just 26 days. Finally, you don't have to flip through a stack of papers to figure out how to vote. So we'd love for you to get involved. We are a community project, and you can help right now by downloading WeVote's app from either App Store. And there's other ways you can help us achieve our goal of informing 2 million voters by the presidential election next year. There's opportunities for dedicated volunteers. We are mostly a volunteer-driven project. And we'd also love introduction to organizations, introductions that do get out the vote, GOTV. So WeVote can be thought of as a marketplace of ideas, and there are ways for organizations in addition to get involved. So we also are a community-based donation, we're funded entirely currently by donations. So every little bit helps, whether you can donate $5 or $5,000. Thank you. I'm Dale McGrew, and if you care about strengthening American democracy, please send me a message so we can connect or follow us on Twitter, and I'm happy to answer questions.
Thanks so much, Dale. I think one of the most interesting things about WeVote is how you've been able to do this as a community effort. And you talked a little bit about the volunteer teams that you've amassed who are helping make this possible. Can you share a little bit more about sort of the structure of your team and how volunteers plug in to help make WeVote possible?
Absolutely. So we have a range of skills that we need to accomplish our mission. One I'll just start with is the engineering and design. So we do a lot of recruiting from either people who are semi-retired or people who are coming out of hack schools or people coming out of college who are looking for internships. We have some senior engineers on the team who help train those folks and educate them. We do regular meetings, probably about 5 meetings a week that are daily stand-up style meetings. So there's a lot of training, a lot of communication, heavily used Slack channel, and just a lot of community.
Thanks. And what are some of the ways that you are able to measure your impact? One of the questions that we have from the audience is, what type of metrics do you look at to understand the extent to which you're increasing civic participation?
Yeah, good question. I think that the metrics question evolves over an organization's lifetime. We're still at the early phase where we're finishing up the minimum viable product. So our theories about what metrics will be important are people who return in future elections, and especially in mid-elections, the non-heavily promoted elections like the midterm elections or the local primaries. So, but that's, if you're interested in helping figure that out, come join the team.
Thanks so much, Dale. And one last question. As you have embarked on this endeavor with WeVote, is there something that you've learned through this work that surprised you or was counter to conventional wisdom?
Yes. So for one thing, the work that you, Tiana, do, as well as Democracy Works and several other organizations, in terms of gathering the core data, that was quite a surprise. The thousands of places you have to pull, even to know what's on your ballot, the distributed nature. I think that was a surprise. And then I think also the commitment that everyone in the space has to have, because in my previous career, one of my previous careers was working in the game industry where the budgets are millions of dollars. And there's just very little budgets, very, very low funding. So you really have to have a committed team of folks. And I'm in awe of everyone on this call who's putting so much in.
I share that admiration. Thank you so much, Dale. And now we're going to hand it over to Jean with Purple Patriot.
No. Yes?
We can see your screen now and you're
Okay,
unmuted.
great.
Yes, thanks.
All right, thank you everyone. I'm Jean Templin. I am the co-founder of Purple Patriot, and our mission really is making civic engagement routine. One of our core founding beliefs is that all people, no matter where you are in the political spectrum, need to find a common ground to collectively govern our communities. This is a little different. We don't, we really sit in this world to bridge people together. It is part of a growing movement right now. There are about 600 different organizations in the United States really looking not to talk about left or right, but to bridge people to make our democracy healthy. Our company was founded about 2 years ago, and it's 2 female founders, which is a sort of unique in this space. We came from working in tech jobs, and we in 2016, kind of after the election, the light went off in our brains. We had been working on lots of platforms and mobile user apps, and we said, how can we take all of this knowledge that we've built and really solve one of the hardest problems that exists in the United States today? And that is, how do we get more people engaged in our democracy? So as you guys, everyone knows here, this isn't new. The problem is huge. We have a huge amount of money being spent to impact government in our communities, but thousands of bills, as we've talked about, thousands of bills, voting, all different things, everything all over the place, but a really small amount of people are really influencing government. So how do we change that? Again, as everybody mentioned here, why? Civic complexity, right? Limited knowledge, decentralized information all over the place, outdated communication systems. You can talk to somebody who is 18 and ask them what a fax is, and they'll have no clue what it is. And still our reps are accepting faxes as a way to communicate to them. Or, even going to a town hall. I don't know if anybody's been to a town hall lately in the crowd, but there's no millennials going to town halls. Mostly it is older people. So all of this way that we're communicating with, the structure that has been put in place is out to date. And really, even the younger generation is not, a lot of people are just not motivated. So we really set out to figure out why. Oops. And we understood there's multiple levels of engagement, right? A lot of different levels, and the high ones, you have people and friends who are marching and going to demonstrations and doing all very active, but we have a lot of Americans still with no, they don't vote even, right? Or they have low. They might vote, they might read some news, they might follow some issues. So our goal is really to come down to the bottom part of this spectrum and understand, how do we get more people involved? Oops. Sorry, I'm having technical difficulties. So there we go. So then we also saw a very interesting trend that started to happen. Not only were there ways to influence from individuals like us in voting and staying interested in what's going on with your reps, brands now started to become active, and the public started to respond. 2 of the biggest ones that you probably know, the Night campaign, more and more brands are becoming what we call social corporate responsibility, and also stuff like Patagonia, they're actually out there helping to sponsor bills. So then when we took all this information, we really wanted to build a civic engagement platform. And when we talk, this is a consumer, so it's something you can download in the App Store, right? And it's for people who are focused on issues. That's how people communicate things. So our goal was really to educate, organize, and motivate Americans to vote at the ballot box each and every single election cycle, but also to vote with their wallet each day. So what does Purple Patriot do for me? So I'll walk you sort of through how a normal user uses it. It is an app that is in both Google and the Play Store. So we educate. So we take this and we create what we call a to-do list. We bring in 3 or 4 or 5 things for you to look at. And then based off of you just tap on that, a card will come up, and it will allow you to do an action, a civic action. And we actually consider learning about issues of civic action. So not just calling and polling or answering questions, but learning about issues. We help keep you really organized and even auto-populate things. So we have in here, behind the scenes, we have all of the legislation being centralized in a database from both federal, and we have some of the state levels. We allow the users to come in and take an action on thumbs up or thumbs down, tell you how your vote, express to representatives how to vote, and you can see an example of that here. We also give you facts. We have other things like just say hello to your reps. Most people would probably never even talk to them. And then also we tell you about different gatherings that's happening, and you can put it on your calendar. So really giving this idea of to-do list and making it really easy for users to use it. And then the last thing we do is we like to call it gamifying civics. We motivate people, go out and track your weekly goals and making them routines. We add a little great job. We allow you to share it with your friends. And then the concept of, we're in our MVP still, and we're building out the concept of leaderboards and how do you really make this more engaging for people who can come in and start to use the app. And we like to say, take three. Take 3 civic engagements each and every single week. We try to keep it extremely simple to do this, and we try to, so that you can build routines. And we know the more routines and the more commitment you have to issues and understanding how the government works, you will go out and vote. And the next thing that we're doing is really put the vote with your wallet into the app. And we're in our R&D stage currently at this. And if you're interested in this, we're adding on additional information of how do I take it and every purchase I make out in the world push an issue, right? And we believe that in the studies that we have seen, a lot of people are more interested in believing, especially the younger generation, that the government isn't as important to them or they won't do anything. So we're really attacking the problem that we want to motivate these younger people to get involved and understand issues and let them use their wallet book. So if you take example of Tom's and some of the other social conscious companies, you'll see a lot of people, younger generations, talking about this and starting to drive their money to these companies that are using issues and helping empower people that way. So if you're interested, the first one we're taking on is equality in the workplace. We call it a woman empowerment score, and really understanding how people, different brands are empowering women within the organizations. You can see, you can sign up here, and we're doing a lot of salons. So we actually are asking both women and men in small 10 to 15 person groups about how to do this, and we would love to have you as part of it. And then one other thing I wanted to just add here for Purple Patriot. Sorry, I don't know why it's not moving forward. Maybe it's slow, maybe it's broken. Is really, as we took this out in market, we were really working with groups like Girl Scouts. We did some items with the Girl Scouts, places where civic engagement was already being taught, and in high schools using our app, getting feedback, and working with organizations. So really, again, as it is nonpartisan, as it is trying to stay straight down the middle, we're not trying to give you a left or a right version of anything. We're trying to stay nonpartisan. And also we worked with like Women's March and different things that have people within their base that are both left and right, and bringing people together over a common cause. Yeah, oops, sorry. There we go. And so, yes, so thank you. That is the end of this. And I guess the last thing I'd like to leave you in thought is, I most recently yesterday read a poll that said 49% of all Americans are afraid to talk about politics. Majority of them are Republicans and Democrats, and most of them are women, because of the fear of being bullied over some things and expressing their concerns. And what we really want to do is make a society that is not polarized, that brings these people together and really allows them to see multiple views of things and not just one, what we like to call a silo. Other groups that are doing this that we're working with is All Sides. You'll see they are an aggregator of news that actually looks at left, right, and center. They'll put all the headlines right next to each other so you can see how they're all spinning it a little differently. Living room conversations to bring people together to start talking about how can we govern together. The issues that we're facing, we all face. We have a different views, a little bit left and right, but we need to come together commonly to govern. Thank you. Questions?
Thank you, Jean. I want to start with a question that I also asked Dale, which is, what is something that you've learned through this work that surprised you or was counter to conventional wisdom?
I guess what surprised me is like being passionate about it, starting a company over it. You think everybody has the same passion as you. You know, even after the 2016 election, you know, millions of people marching, and then you realize that it fades very quickly, right? And how do you motivate? And when we really started to talk to the younger generation and all the barriers they were facing and seeing how they were using the technology very differently, it was interesting, which is why we, you know, the second part of this mission we're on, To Vote Your Wallet, came up and really solidified as we started to understand that. How do you get that young kid really involved? You know, I think, I don't know the stat, maybe somebody here does, but how many people are actively involved yearly, you know, in organizations across the United States? Is it 40 million, 50, 100? It's still only a third of the population, right? How do you really get to that 350 million people or whatever that are using something? And how do you get this at impact? So I think that to me was really interesting because I was very involved and I thought, of course, everyone's like me.
Yeah. Related to that, I would love to hear what's an impact that Purple Patriot has had so far that you are most proud of?
I think working with the Girl Scouts was really fun. I actually did some of those myself. And they have a civic engagement badge. Not sure if everybody knows that, but they do. And they have a couple programs that they work through. And watching the girls, they were so smart. They loved, because it's also interesting at that age, their parents have to give them consent to download, their parents are there helping them to download the app because they have a lot of apps blocked. So letting them have an app that they have access to, that they can read things. They look at people's pictures. Even my 8-year-old niece is like, she looked at one of her reps and said, she's ugly. Because just seeing how they interact with it is so interesting, because we need to get people involved very young to build those patterns, right? To build that commitment to this.
Awesome. So I now want to turn it over to a discussion with the full set of panelists. And I want to kick things off with a question about sort of advice to folks who are thinking about getting into this type of work. So what did you learn in developing your product and getting used to it that you want to pass on to other people thinking about making public good technology apps to spark civic engagement? This is a question for each of the panelists. Let's maybe start with Jill.
Absolutely. I think in developing an app that works side by side with processes that already exist in each state for registering to vote and requesting a vote by mail ballot, the most important thing for Democracy Works to figure out was where do the gaps exist. And that comes from talking to people, talking to voters. It can't be overstated that it's important to design a tool for people who you know are facing a problem, not people who you think are facing a problem. And so talking to folks, meeting folks where they are, both through partnerships and implementation of the tool and actually building the tool itself is important. And that's why we partner with different organizations that help us optimize our tool over time. And we're constantly doing user testing and looking at our analytics and things like that. And so I would just say, keep your user front and center and, remember to meet folks where they are and build bridges.
Thanks, Jill. Is there one other panelist that might want to share a lesson learned that they would pass on to someone considering developing these sorts of apps? It looks like, Dale, you just unmuted yourself.
I'm happy to, yes. Yeah, definitely. So I think getting to know the existing ecosystem is critical. And by the way, I agree with everything Jill was saying as well. And this is actually kind of an extension of that. It's complex. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of people who are either trying something now or who have tried and are no longer trying. This space is very much like, I was very influenced. I don't know if people have heard of the bristlecone pine tree that lives at 10,000 feet, and they live for like 12,000 years. They're very good at surviving with very little resources. I think of this ecosystem that way, that you just have to build your organization to last. And as part of that, and also extending into the transparency side, I think it's critical that even companies working in the civic engagement space should seriously be considering open sourcing their software and keeping transparency front and center, because I think we're past the point where anyone can get away with kind of protecting and hiding formulas and everything that goes into helping us do our civic duty.
Thank you, Dale. Jean?
I'd like to say the gap that I learned, and I think everyone should, when you're looking at this, look through different lenses. We all have sort of a lens that we look at things, and really remember to go and look at other lenses. And I think that was one of the things that I learned. We actually moved part of the company to Colorado and spent a lot of time in the Midwest, and really understanding how people and the way the words people are using, the way people interact, it's very different than coastal sides of the United States. And building the tool sets that you're going to do if you're going to go across the United States, really understanding it's not a one-size-fits-all sort of thing, but that to put on those other lenses and see how people are doing it.
Thanks, Jean. And Alexander?
Yeah, I mean, this may be mildly painful for anyone on the phone considering starting a civic tech company, but it is one of the hardest types of companies you can start. And I think business models are very difficult. And I think a lot of people who are looking to start civic tech companies, because they're very passionate, are more zealous for a particular cause. And I would say, if you are serious about creating a sustainable civic tech company, you cannot be a religious zealot for a cause. If you want to be an advocacy person, that's fine. Be an advocacy person, that's great. We always need more of those. They're a very valuable part of society. But building a civic tech app that's scalable is very, very different. And so I would say, take people where they are and think about what the nature of government is meant to be. Government is meant to be this passionate. It's meant to include as many people as possible and provide for as many folks as it possibly can. It is not meant to be an advocacy tool. That is not what government is for. Advocacy tools go towards government. And so I would just say, if you're thinking about building an app, consider what will make it scalable, not what will make it maybe emotionally nourishing, because this is not an emotionally nourishing space. It's a very important space, but it's difficult to build products here.
Thank you, Alexander, and to each of you for those really insightful pieces of advice. The next question I think maybe came up for Jean from the audience, and but if other folks also want to chime in, please do. The question is, the gamification approach is fascinating for civic engagement. Have you been able to track the relationship between engagement and impact?
Yeah, so absolutely. If they're the impact that we track, and we're only a couple years old, so it's earlier, right? We haven't been through a full election to understand if they're the full piece of the circle, but we are able to track, like, if they take an action, what type of action, how many actions, and we can see that. And of course, we track it on the back end and really hope. And we have some models where we're looking at is what's the right number, right? And when does that person become truly engaged, and hopefully it will turn into a vote. So that's the idea. So yes.
Excellent, thank you. One of the questions that came from the audience is that there are a lot of high school model government programs for 4 to 6 months that have students learn about the legislative process and lobbying to pass bills and elect officials. Have any of these apps or platforms been used or adapted for these types of programs?
I can take that one. Yes, I think generally high school education, like NSL classes, government classes, are one of the more interesting expansion markets for the kind of stuff that we do. I imagine some other companies as well. We have been used as a curriculum add-on for teachers teaching this kind of stuff because we provide non-biased summaries of legislation. And it's really, really difficult to get kids interested in a bill. And so that's where marketing automation, which I referenced before, becomes a really big thing, where I know what someone is interested in because of how they onboard into our application, and I can follow up with targeted push notifications that then drive them back into the application using, rich push notifications with imagery and emojis and all kinds of things, which work really well on younger kids. And so it's been huge for us, for sure. We're very bullish on that market.
And I love that because, again, the civic engagement is a habit. So the extent to which we can help people start young is one of the best ways to get people to become engaged for their lives. Any other folks have answers to that question? I'll just say briefly that our ballot data has been used by civic engagement or civic learning organizations. One of them is First Vote North Carolina that runs an election simulation for about 30,000 high school and middle schoolers in North Carolina. And our ballot data has powered what look like real ballots there for a simulation election where fifth graders act as poll workers. And it's been really fascinating not only to see how that's helped them have a really realistic experience, but also seeing the sort of data on the election results that come out of the high schools and middle schools. And I think that Democracy Works was also a partner on that project.
Yeah, that came to mind when that question was asked, for sure. That's a great org.
Yeah, great. And before wrapping up, I just wanted to see if any of the panelists have any questions for any of the other panelists.
Why are you guys all so awesome?
It's hard to answer, truly.
I actually have a question. Generally, we saw at Countable a massive change in civic engagement patterns and behavior patterns after Donald Trump took the White House, understandably so. We saw Countable actually became one of the top most downloaded apps in the entire world in the iTunes market, just under Twitter for a period of time, which is ridiculous for like a civic tech application like us. It was amazing, but everything was on fire. And then we saw our user base become younger and more female in terms of the people that wanted to take civic action and get engaged. And so we saw some massive changes. I'm interested just to hear from the other panelists. Did you see any changes? How do you think civic engagement has changed since the massive volatility in the court of public opinion over the past couple of years?
That's a really good question. I have made some, I guess, observations along those lines that are interesting. Our user base between 2012 and 2016, mostly in 2015 and 2016, grew from less than 1 million to over 6 million. And so we had definitely huge growth. One kind of anecdote that I think speaks to just the difficulty of voter turnout specifically at the local level and how like even the highest civic engagement may not bridge the gap completely. Los Angeles, where I live, had one of the largest, I think, women's march turnouts. We had 750,000 people march in the downtown Los Angeles Women's March in January of 2017. 2 months later in March, we had a countywide election, and the city of Los Angeles's turnout in that countywide election was 12% of the voting eligible population. And so I think that just speaks to the fact that we still need to be bridging the idea of civic engagement being voting in every election, not just voting every 2 years. And yeah, that was an anecdote. I guess that's kind of a negative response to your question, but just a thought, yeah.
Does anyone else have thoughts on Alexander's question? Okay, I want to bring in one other broad question from folks, from someone in the audience, which was, does anyone have any reflections on innovations in election security in the context of hacks?
Yeah, I actually posted something in the chat about this a moment ago. I think someone just reposted it. I tried to start a company years ago to leverage blockchain to underwrite public elections, which is a terrible, terrible idea. Blockchain is not secure for that type of stuff. And blockchain is basically good for nothing. I'm not a big blockchain guy after starting a company in it. And there was a guy I met with named Joseph Canary who runs a company called Galois, he's probably the world's leading expert on this subject and is currently running a pilot with DARPA to go through some of this stuff. If you're interested in it, I would highly, highly recommend checking it out because the state of our election hardware is really bad, which everybody knows. And I think he's one of the guys that really pioneered the idea that decentralized encryption like blockchain was not the right idea, whereas that was where a lot of people was moving. Centralized high assurance systems are the way to go. They can be monitored and logged and built really intentionally. And so I would definitely recommend checking out Galois, and his Twitter feed, which is posted in the comments, is just like a daily treasure trove of everything you need to know about what they're doing and what's happening with election security.
Yeah, and I would say, go ahead, Dale.
Oh, I'm sorry. If I could add to that, I think that unfortunately, this is not one of those things that can easily be solved in a single central place. There are thousands, Tiana would know the exact number, but thousands of local or groups, that registrars that run the elections, and state-of-the-art systems being bought today are still running on Windows systems from, I think, 2009 that haven't had the latest patches. There was a study released recently. So I think it's really more of a local problem than anyone wants to admit. And I don't know, I'll turn it back to you, Tiana.
Yeah, there are about 25,000 local election officials, and one of our core strategies around election security is making sure that they all know the fundamentals and how to protect our voting systems. So it's not just a technology challenge, it also is one about building skills. And with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Chris. Thank you all.
Great, and thank you, Tiana, for moderating. Thanks to all of our presenters, and thanks everybody for your questions. One last thing to note, on September 27th, we'll be having an in-house, offline Public Good App House breakfast demo event at the Impact Hub in San Francisco, focused on apps that address addiction issues. You will receive an email about that, some info via Eventbrite. I would encourage you all, if you're interested in these topics and the public good app space in general, to follow us in Twitter and the newsletter, which is www.tinyletter.com/publicgoodapphouse. So thanks again, everyone, and much appreciated. All the best to all of us for 2020.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll be sending around resources to everyone who registered, so you'll be receiving these decks and the recorded version of this event. Thank you.